Okay. I see people are coming in. Awesome. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone to the StatsPhD Panel. This is a joint venture by students at University of Washington, University of Michigan, and UC Berkeley. So I'm just going to talk through a bit of our plans for today. So first up, we're just going to talk a bit about our background and goals for this panel. And then we'll talk you through the instructions for Q&A for audience questions. And we'll introduce the panelists along with myself. Then we'll ask y'all to introduce yourselves. And then that'll start, after that, we'll start having some the panelists answer questions. And after a bit, we'll open up Q&A to the audience. And finally, we'll close at 6. Depending on how the panel is going around, then we may extend it a bit longer, depending on how the panelists are feeling and how the audience is feeling. We'll decide that thing. Yeah. First up, background and goals. So in general, it's difficult to apply to a PhD program, and your ability to sort of navigate the process and pursue your goals can be affected by factors that are outside of yourself. And the point of this panel is to, and sort of our broader goal is to make stats more accessible and make pursuing a PhD in stats more accessible. So yeah, we're just gonna use this opportunity to inform students about the process and about how to be competitive applicants and in general about the experience of being a PhD student. So Q&A. In your Zoom window, you should see a Q&A button. That is where you should be, that's where you should submit questions. Don't submit questions in chat. There you can, we'll ask you to participate in chat in some portions of the panel, but for questions in particular, submit them in the Q&A function or using the Q&A function. Before you submit a question though, read through them and make sure you're not submitting a question similar to the same as the question that's already been asked. And if you see something that you want to be answered, you can upvote it, and then it'll go higher up on the list, and that'll bring it closer to or more into our attention. Only use the Q&A function for questions for the panel. If you have any technical issues or technical questions, you can use the chat feature, or you can email contact@statsphd.com, and we'll help you out with that. Okay, first up, we have a poll on application anxiety. Dan, do you mind dropping the poll? So yeah, first up, we just want to get an idea of what in the application process is, concerning you most. And that'll help us get an idea of, what we should be tailoring the panels in. I'm seeing a lot of folks saying the statement of purpose, I understood it entirely, especially if you don't have an idea of what it should look like, or you haven't read a bunch of other people's successful statements in the past. While they're saying research experience, I was personally an issue I faced, choosing what schools to apply to. Those are all pretty high up, so. Okay. I'm gonna give a few more seconds for folks to respond. So we have the majority of folks already participating, so. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, statement of purpose is very high up there, but research experience and choosing schools to apply to are pretty high up there also. So thanks for participating. Okay, next we're gonna have the panelists introduce themselves. First, I'm Alex. I'm a second-year PhD student at UC Berkeley for an MCM. I graduated from Howard University a couple of years back with a bachelor's in math. Yeah, and so I'm gonna sort of go by school and pick people out to introduce themselves next. First up, Austin.
All right, I'm Austin. As it says, I'm a first-year PhD student in stats at Berkeley. I got my undergrad from Texas A&M, and I'm currently interested in the theory of deep learning. That's probably what my future work will be in.
Okay, thanks. Tiffany?
Hi everyone, I'm Tiffany. I'm a fourth year statistics PhD student at UC Berkeley. I did my undergrad at Rice, majoring in math and statistics, and my research interest is kind of at the intersection of stats, machine learning, and biomedical data.
Thanks. Next, at the University of Michigan, Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm a third year PhD student at Michigan. I previously got my bachelor's in math and statistics at Carleton College and then worked for a couple years. And my research is in causal inference and specifically in methods that combine experimental and observational data.
Okay. Thanks. Simon.
Hi everyone, I'm Simon. I'm a third year PhD student at the University of Michigan. Previously, I did a master in statistics at the University of Montreal, so I come from Montreal in Canada. I did some research there during my master, so that was kind of my previous experience. And also, I did like a long internship at Ubisoft Montreal between my master's and my PhD. Currently, I'm working on network data for my research.
Thanks. At the University of Washington, Anupreet.
Hi everyone, I'm Anupreet. I'm a fourth year PhD student in Department of Statistics at UW. I did my bachelor's and master's from IIT Kanpur in India, and I'm mostly interested in Bayesian statistics and sparsity related or model selection related problems.
And last but not least, Erin.
Hi, I'm Erin. I'm a first year PhD student at UW. I did my undergrad in math at Haverford College and then my master's in statistics at the University of Chicago. And then I worked for a couple of years before starting the PhD program.
Okay, awesome. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Next up, we would love for y'all to introduce y'all selves. So feel free to include as much information as you want, or as much or as little as you want. But we like some things that you may want to share, name and pronouns, your academic background, or what university you attend most recently or are currently attending, when you're planning to apply, why you're interested, things like that. So feel free to go ahead and start submitting that in the chat now. I think people are taking a bit of time to write out their introductions. Okay, I see someone at University of Florida. Wonderful. Some folks at Georgia State. Okay, things are starting to come in now. I'm seeing a pretty big amount of variance between schools. A couple folks from Florida, U Chicago, Albion, Carleton. Some schools I haven't heard of before, which is really nice. It's always good to have people who are coming from smaller universities or smaller schools and colleges and these types of things. And all types of backgrounds and majors, math, stats, CS, masters, bachelors. Hopefully this could be a good resource for people from all those different backgrounds. Okay. Yeah, this is really cool. This is really good to see. I think I'm going to go ahead and move on to the questioning part of the panel. So this is just sort of a starting point for questions. I'm going to actually stop screen sharing now because it's no longer relevant. But yeah, so there are lots of questions folks have in terms of the application process. I think I want to start with something a bit broader and simpler, which is how and why did you get into statistics? Anyone who's so compelled can go first.
I can go first. So my process, I started my undergrad in mathematics and I slowly drifted towards statistics. So towards the end, I took some probability and statistics, like a lot of people in math. And when I wanted to do my master's, I was hesitating between math and stat, and consulted with my honors thesis advisor, and suggested to me to do in statistics. Like there's more, I guess the job market is better for statistics. So that was my main reason, I guess.
I can maybe go next on this same question. So yeah, I also did my bachelor's in mathematics and like some bit of computer science. I took some statistics courses and that's how I got involved in it. Did a master's project in statistics as well, but I wasn't yet sure whether I want to do a PhD or not. So I decided to take a break, work for a year, and realize that I would prefer to be in academia over in corporate, and that's how I'm here now.
I can speak to this one as well, I think. I also did my undergrad in math. It seems like a lot of us had that experience. And I really liked doing that kind of work and that kind of thinking, but I also felt like I wanted to sort of use those skills to work on more real world applied problems where I could try to make a difference to issues I cared about. And I felt like statistics was a good avenue for that because it's math, but lends itself to more applied problems often.
I think similarly, I'm pretty grounded by problems and want to work on real world problems, particularly those in the biomedical sciences. And so statistics allowed me to use both problem solving math, and just numbers to kind of tackle these problems.
Yeah, and then I was initially drawn to stats. I did my undergrad in statistics, so I was interested a little earlier. And I was also interested in how useful it is for such a wide variety of real world problems. I mean, you could go into econ, bio, CS, like political science, like any sort of, or public policies, I would say, any sort of field. However, since then, my interests have become a little more theoretical and just more specific towards machine learning. But that was definitely what initially drew me in.
Okay, thanks everyone. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense there. People have different reasonings and motivations, but end up in a similar place. So the next question I want to ask, I think, gets back to sort of the original goal of the panel, is to sort of address the difficulties that people face in the process. And so I just want to know, what are some of the struggles you faced in pursuing a PhD or in being pursuing statistics as a field as a researcher?
I can start on this one. So I think it's no secret that graduate work is extremely difficult. But it sort of took me a little bit by surprise. So the coursework in a statistics PhD is extremely theoretical, pretty high level math, your first couple years. So, you have to make sure you get through that. And so that was definitely a challenge for me at first, but then and I know that is a challenge for many people, getting into the field, sort of being interested maybe more in applied things, but you still need to get that theoretical background. So that's definitely something to consider, especially if you might be interested in something more applied, that the coursework is really based in math. But I came to really enjoy it and sort of see how then that would help do more rigorous work in the future.
I think one of the most challenging, parts about going from undergrad to graduate school is that in graduate school, all the questions you're asking are very open-ended and there's not really one right answer. And being okay with either being wrong or just not knowing what the answer is takes a lot of getting used to, and there's really no deadline. So in undergrad, you have a lot of homeworks that each have a deadline. These homework problems also probably have a right answer that you're supposed to get to, but with research, I think this is kind of a switch in your approach and the mindset that's kind of it takes a lot of getting used to and definitely a learning curve, but it's definitely okay to not know what you're doing a lot of the time.
Anupreet or Simon, maybe y'all want to give a bit of input?
Yeah, I can jump in. So on a different, I guess, topic for this question, mine was I had to leave my country for this to pursue my PhD. So that was also something I was apprehending in the beginning, to be in another country, more alone, knowing nobody. I mean, everything worked out fine. I made friends here, and it always works out. But before doing it, it's always an issue that you might think like it will, how will time go away? So that's a big issue.
Yeah. Okay.
So I can say one last thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, just really quick. I just want to really reiterate what Charlotte said. Is I think a lot of people, especially if they've only taken one side course or they only took AP stats or one project, I think it's very common to underestimate how math heavy a PhD program can be. I mean, even the most applied people in our program in my cohort are very competent with proofs and pretty high level probability concepts. So definitely, if you're at all shaky with math, you want to shore up on that, or just be very sure that's what you want to be doing.
Yeah, for sure. None of this is to discourage you from pursuing stats. It's just to keep you aware of the fact that math is a very important part of the field, especially if you're pursuing a PhD. And so it's something to keep in mind when you're going down that path. Yeah, so since we're talking about coursework, since Charlotte mentioned it, would y'all mind speaking a bit on sort of how coursework has played a role in mostly I'm thinking of the application process. Like, how did your undergrad courses, do you think, influence your application? Like, where you applied, or maybe what schools you ended up being accepted to? Also, one more thing before anyone answers, there are a few things that I forgot to mention. First of all, is that the panel will be recorded. So if you missed something at the beginning, don't worry, you will be able to see the rest of it later. And secondly, I forgot to ask the moderators to introduce themselves. We have some folks who are not on the panel, but who are helping out, make sure that everything is flowing smoothly. And I think maybe they are doing that or have done that right now. So yeah, just to catch up on all of that. Anupreet, I think you're about to answer the question.
Yeah, so I think coursework is a tricky question in the sense that it depends upon which school you're applying to and like what part of like school you're applying to, whether it's stats or biostats and things like that. But in general, having a little bit of coursework showing that you have the basic math related like coursework and also some basic stat related coursework usually goes the long way. It's obviously better if you have done more coding related courses as well, and like computer science related courses and courses related to the field, or if you have some exposure related to the field you are in. But I think most of the times in application, what people would look for is whether you have like done the basic checklist of math courses and stat courses, and like how have you performed in that.
And then just to continue, when you said like the basic checklist of math and stats courses, what I usually think of is like linear algebra, analysis, probability, things like that are going to be quite important. In my undergrad, I double majored in stats and math, and I think if I had to drop one, I think I would drop my stats degree, if I'm being completely like honest. I'm not sure how unpopular, like how popular of an opinion that is, but if I had to guess, I wasn't there on my application review, of course, but the fact that I took grad like math classes and a lot of proof-based math classes, I imagine that had more impact than, for example, my undergrad level stats classes.
I just want to add, like, I think taking these math classes is helpful. Of course, it's not going to do you any harm, but if you like don't have this math background, I don't want to persuade you not to apply to stats programs. Just like the nice part about stats is it encompasses such a broad range of skills. And not everyone does theoretical stats. My research, for example, is very much applied. And I know there are programs out there who are certainly looking for people who are very interested in non-theoretical statistics, maybe more applied work, maybe more software related work. So yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, certainly I could attest to that in the sense that there are a lot of PhD students in stats program, like including at UW, and I'm sure at Berkeley and Michigan as well, who do not have a stats major or a math major and are doing equally great. So my answer was mostly like what coursework can be helpful, but like that does not mean that other coursework are not helpful. So obviously you can find many examples of people from chemistry, public policy, and many other departments are doing their PhD in stats.
Yeah, to echo what's been said about stats encompassing such a broad range of skills, I think also the like applied coding skills are really helpful too for sort of actually doing work in the field and will come up in a lot of research unless your research is really theoretical. So I think that's also a strength to bring to the program. And I think everyone has areas in their coursework and background that they're better prepared and less prepared in.
Yeah, and similar to that, not related to coursework, but having a strong programming background can help you basically in the first semester, first year. That's also a good thing to that can help you like alleviate the first few years in the program.
Thanks for all those really helpful answers. It's also good to have different perspectives from folks. And just to reiterate, like after the first couple of years, the coursework kind of falls by the wayside, and when you get into your research, the courses don't really matter all that much. Just to stick on the topic of applications for a second. I just wanted to ask about research experience and like what research experience y'all had before y'all joined the programs you're in, and how do you feel that helped your application, as you had any?
I can speak to this one. I had some math research experience in undergrad. There was a required undergrad thesis in my undergrad, so I think that helped. But when I worked before doing my PhD, and there I also got opportunities to sort of do research type projects and to co-author peer-reviewed papers and things like that. So I think it's not too late to get research experience if you didn't have a lot in undergrad. Basically, there are sort of positions that are like adjacent to academia that sort of give that same type of experience. So I think that really helped my application, having that additional experience.
So I think I had an unusually high amount of research experience because I had family who were faculty members. So I basically did research almost every summer in undergrad, and then I had 2 years after. But actually, what I want to talk about more about having research experience is that's really what shaped me feeling confident and understanding that I wanted to pursue statistics and pursue a PhD, because I had first had experiences at like a research experience for undergraduates, and I actually had a really bad experience and really didn't like it and didn't like the culture, and sort of took a step back from like knowing for certain that I wanted to do a PhD. But then I worked in industry and sort of realized that I wasn't really satisfied with the level of rigor that we were doing things at, and I wanted to learn more and do more. So I really think, especially once you get through the classes, you're going to be spending 2, 3, 4 years sort of on your own with your advisor doing research, and making sure that that's something that you actually really like is important to understand, and then you can actually really talk about that in your application, that you know what you want to do in terms of that you like research.
And to continue on that topic, it's hard to know like how much your research experience will help you, but to me it helped me to make the decision. So I did, like in my master, I did a master's thesis, which led to a paper eventually. So that helps you understand like what's the research process and what will be your next 5 year. And I mean, this experience helped me to actually decide to do a PhD.
So I had some research experience as an undergrad, but and I think like others, it helped me to figure out whether or not I wanted to do a PhD, because a lot of the PhD is doing research. But still, I think as part of the application, research sure is helpful, but there's a lot more that goes into this, like why you want to do a PhD, that I think can be kind of emphasized in the statement of purpose, and really tell kind of the reader like why you want to do a PhD, what you hope to get out of it, and similarly.
Yeah, I think I had a moderate amount of research experience coming in, and it was mostly thanks to summer programs like REUs, the research experience for undergraduates. And it's very unfortunate. I'm sad to hear that Charlotte had a bad time at one of those. I did two. Well, one of them was an actual REU, which you can find through some NSF website, and the other was another NSF funded summer program. And if you're a junior or below, I cannot recommend these summer programs enough. It's this way it doesn't detract from your coursework too much. I mean, these projects usually end up going on longer anyway, but it's like the summer is a great time to participate in these sorts of programs. And oftentimes they'll actually pay you a pretty generous stipend, cover room and board. And they also claim to prioritize underrepresented minorities and people who need more representation in STEM. So yeah, so I feel like there's not a lot of good reasons to not do one of these if you don't have any other plan. And it's a great way to boost your resume going into grad school and discover if you even like research.
Thanks for those answers. Yeah, just to piggyback a bit on what Austin said, I actually RUs are a big part of my undergrad experience, because my undergrad university didn't really have any statisticians, so they're very helpful in helping me form my idea of what I wanted to do. Okay, I'm going to start getting to some of the audience questions. Jacob asks, what is the day-to-day life of a PhD like? What occupies most of your working time, and do you have free time on the weekends? I'm going to guess the answer to the second question is no, but that might just be me.
Maybe I can go first. So I feel like PhD, the nice thing about it is that while it is still a job that you have, it is a flexible job. You can decide your hours. You can decide your workload based on like however you want to manage it. And while Alex is right, sometimes it can get stressful and you don't really get time on weekends. But like I feel like because of the higher flexibility, you can move things, shuffle things around, and create some time for yourself on the weekends. Regarding day-to-day life, I think usually in the first 2 years at most schools, it's heavily dependent on the coursework. You would be taking like 2, 3, 4, depending upon whether you're in semester or quarter system and so on. And homeworks of those classes and things related to that take up most of your time. After that, like in the last 3 years, it's mostly research. And so you decide your hours, you decide your goals for the week or for the day. And once you are done with them, you can just call it a day. So yeah, that's generally what I feel day-to-day life is. There's the TA component, sometimes depending upon whether you're TAing or RAing. But yeah, other than that, like it's pretty flexible, and which is what I like most about my PhD program.
Yeah, so I think, yeah, it really varies by what year in the program you are. So like first year, I was working like 50 hours a week and didn't really have time in the evenings or on weekends. But then this year, mostly so far, I was basically working from 9 to 5, although now I'm working towards a prelim exam to become a candidate, so the hours have sort of bumped up again. But yeah, it's also very flexible. But to talk to sort of what a day might look like today I was doing, probably spent a couple hours writing and making presentations, and then also was doing some data analysis and like working on a package in R. I also had a meeting, and you might also have like prep for teaching in a day. So I feel like days can often be varied in terms of what kinds of things you're doing. Lots of PhD students also do service work, so that might be taking up some of your time.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have a very similar answer. Just to add a little bit, often you either have some sort of tea or RA appointment with your work, so this may take a lot of your time actually in a week, and that's a nice thing because it makes you first get experience in whatever thing you're doing, but also it makes you do other things and get away from research, and so that's a nice feature too.
This is less on the day-to-day side, I guess, but one thing that sort of surprised me, or not surprised, but was interesting to me coming here is the degree to which, compared to undergrad, it's very much a choose your own adventure. So a lot of times you have at least some choice in what year you take classes, or even like when you take some of your exams, and like things like when you start research. So you sort of have some flexibility to forge your own path, and that sort of gives you some control over what your day-to-day looks like. Like if you're doing something that's busy one semester, like if you're taking one really hard class, you can take you don't want to take another hard class also, or yeah, you get to really choose your own adventure, which is a blessing and a curse in some ways.
Yeah, to echo what everyone's been saying, there's so much flexibility in what your day looks like. You really do get to choose like what seminars you want to attend today, and maybe who you're going to meet with. Maybe sometimes I'm working with other students on projects, so I'll set up meetings with them. Other times reading papers or coding, things like that.
Okay, sounds great. Just a reminder that to the attendees to feel comfortable asking questions and using the Q&A feature. I think some of the moderators are answering questions. And then some of the questions we'll be also asking here. So Robert asked, how was the process of selecting your research topic and advisor? And I'll just add a little addendum to that, like when did that happen? Maybe Tiffany can go first.
Yeah, I think I knew going into the PhD that I wanted to stick in this like realm of biomedical data science, machine learning. And so there were a couple professors at Berkeley who were interested in this area. And then one way to get to know professors is by taking their classes, as well as many times these professors will have group meetings. So attending group meetings is a helpful way to get to know what their group is working on currently, because not always their website always captures what they are currently doing. So it's just talking to the professors and talking to their students also. Professors sometimes are hard to contact, and so talking to their students is a more direct way to see like what is the professor working on, because the student can probably give you more time and concrete details on what their project is.
Similar, I think the group meetings are a good thing to attend. Maybe reading groups or research group meetings that may allow you to just attend to see what they are doing. I think they are very relevant. When I came in the program, I didn't really have a advice in mind. I knew it was going more like computational statistics or something similar, but attending these group meetings made me focus on a few and finally on the final choice.
Also, like a lot of universities, I think most of them would generally have like a qualifying examination or something of that sort, which allows you to like have a ground to jump into research from. So like it can be of different forms in different universities, but that's another way how people kind of get to know like their potential advisors and other professors in the university, and also get to try to do research with them.
Also, people have alluded to this, but statistics is a field where I think for almost all departments, you don't need to know who you want to work with going in. You get to spend the year taking courses, going to seminars, going to group meetings, talking to people, and then sort of in Michigan, it's like by the first summer, you find someone to work with.
Okay, those are all helpful questions or answers, sorry. I saw a couple of questions about transitioning. One that was about if your program helped you transition into grad school, and also how was the transition from undergrad or from working to grad school in terms of the social and academic aspects. Remember, Charlotte had mentioned that some of the coursework was different, and Simon had mentioned that transition, like moving to another country, was difficult. So if either one of y'all want to comment on that, or if anyone else wants to answer the question, that would be great.
Sure. So I was also very rusty on math since I had worked for a bit, but I think in general, you just have to be a completely different kind of student in grad school than in undergrad, and I was really not used to like not having the prerequisites and needing to sort of study on the side and failing a lot. And so like the how to succeeding in grad school looks very different than succeeding in undergrad or even in a job. And so just learning from your peers what that looks like and getting encouragement from people is what helped me a lot. And also just recognizing like really where I needed to be just to achieve my goals and learn what I wanted to learn in order to do the research that I want to do. Another transition is from like a job, is that there's no like direct training for a lot of things in graduate school. So you really need to like use other people as resources to learn what the culture is and what's expected of you. So that's something that I would also have in mind with that transition. But I think I've found that other students are really helpful in helping you navigate that process.
I was also coming from 2 years working, and so I definitely also felt a little rusty on the math and even things like taking derivatives and integrals. So I definitely did some review beforehand that didn't feel too strenuous because I sort of had a break between work and starting here, but was definitely really, really helpful. In terms of like day-to-day life transition coming from work, even though as a grad student, there's no longer well-defined evenings and weekends and you're probably working more, it definitely feels like I'm enjoying having more flexibility and not sort of having to do this like work, 9 to 5 every day and then just artificially have a whole open weekend. So you have less time in some ways, but you also have more time.
Right, I had a similar, I guess, experience as you. So I did like a 8-month internship, so where you get like a 9 to 5 job that now you also have a boss and people to answer to, and now you jump into this PhD that you're more alone, so you have to manage your things a lot more individually. So that's a big transition, but everything works out in the end.
And I think that while there is definitely a big difference between just doing your undergrad coursework, trying to get the best grade possible, and doing, like, writing a research paper, I think that there's kind of a built-in transition within the PhD, in that I don't think at any school you're expected to do any kind of research your first semester, or maybe even your first year. So, I mean, your first year is essentially going to be still coursework, harder. And I echo what some of the panelists said about they're not as strict with their prereqs. So you are probably gonna have to do some more self-learning. Learning from your fellow students is awesome. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses, but yeah, I wouldn't worry about the transition from undergrad to, what it's like to all of a sudden start writing your thesis. Cause your 2 years of PhD are kind of coursework heavy, and then your third year is half and half, and then fourth and fifth, you're just a straight up researcher. So I think that's nice for sure.
Yeah, and you're definitely not going through this process alone. Like everyone else in your cohort is going through the same thing, so you can learn from each other, and just go through the PhD together.
Yeah, and I'll just sort of piggyback off of everyone else has said. In my personal experience, the transition was not easy, especially because I was making it during the pandemic when everything was virtual. But my peers and my cohort mates are the ones who made it like easy. It probably wouldn't have happened if they weren't there. So very much lean on the people who are in your cohort and in your program, because they can help you out a lot. So sort of related, Jillian asks, do you recommend going straight into a PhD program after undergrad, or getting a master's and a PhD? Before anyone else, I'll just say that most people that I know personally don't have a master's degree in the PhD program. And I don't think most PhD, like stats PhD programs, require a master's. But people may have, like, the recommendation may be different depending on people's experiences. So feel free to answer that.
So I think the way like PhD programs are structured, at least in US, is it's usually a 5-year degree at most places, where the first 2 years is essentially coursework, which kind of gets you a master's degree as well, in some sense. And like the coursework is similar to master's students, essentially, who are admitted into the department. So I think in that respects, you don't really need a bachelor's degree. Of course, if you, a master's degree. And of course, if you have a master's degree, you can kind of skip some of the courses, like depending upon like waivers and the like requirements of the department and so on. And yeah, I don't really think that there's an issue if you directly want to go from bachelor's into PhD in general.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the masters will maybe help you in the first year because of the coursework, but I don't think it's really needed.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. And obviously, getting a master's degree is different in that you have to finance it. So that's also sort of a barrier. But I personally did get a master's degree. My undergrad was very much in math and very much theoretical. So I had very little stats and applied skills, and I wanted to work in the field after to sort of see what it was like and get some experience before doing a PhD. So that worked out well for me to sort of be able to get some of those more applied coding skills and learn sort of the essentials of statistics. And it does, if you do get a master's, I'm not sure how it works at different programs, but in some programs like UW, you can, it does like make it so you don't have to take some of the prerequisite coursework. So that was also a plus, but definitely not necessary.
And then I'm not sure, most of the audience probably already knows this, but in almost any stats program, they're going to pay you to attend. Like you're going to either get through a fellowship, a stipend, or you're going to work for it with research or teaching. So you should never start going into debts or have to pay for a PhD, as far as I know. Whereas I'm not as familiar with the funding situation of masters, but if you know you want to do the PhD, then then if a master's is going to cost money, I'm not sure if that'd be wise. Anyways, yeah, it's kind of, that situation's unique. Just in general, masters usually don't provide funding, and PhDs do. That's just that might influence your decision.
Yeah, it's very good to know. Yeah, masters can be a lot of money, and a PhD should not be any money at all. Okay, so another question someone asked, I can't find the question who asked, but what are the differences between stats and biostats programs? I don't think we have anyone in a biostats program here, but maybe people were deciding between stats and biostats and sort of comment on how they decided stats versus biostats, or maybe their experiences with interacting with biostats professors and things like that.
Yeah, so I can speak to deciding between whether to apply to stats or biostats program. I can't speak too much to like what is a biostats program like, since I'm in a stats program. But the reason why I chose to apply to a statistics program rather than biostats is I just wanted to I guess broaden my knowledge. Like I know that I want to do research kind of in the bio realm, but the classes that I'm taking and the skills that I develop through the course of my PhD, I kind of wanted them to be broader than just biostatistics. And so I just didn't want to limit myself to focus like my training solely on the bio route, even though that is kind of my core research interest. I just didn't want to like confine myself to that space.
Yeah, so I also was sort of deciding between stats and biostats. I think a couple of things that I remember being different were that the average funding situation was a bit different between stats and biostats. Like in a lot of biostats departments are in schools of public health or schools of medicine, and because of that, they don't usually TA as much, and they usually RA, but sometimes not for their advice, but for their consulting for some other researcher. And I think also in biostats program, the cohort tends to be, well, the program is a little bit less mathematical, a little bit less theoretical, and the cohort tends to be a bit more applied, and maybe you're from less mathy backgrounds. Yeah, I said TA and RA to specify that a TA is a teaching assistant, so someone who is helping a professor teach a class, maybe grading papers or giving sessions outside of the regular lecture. And then an RA is a research assistant, who is someone who is assisting a professor with their research and is on some grants, like an NSF or NIH grants, instead of being paid by working with a professor. Okay, up next, Sophia asked, what's one thing you didn't expect or that surprised you after you started your PhD? Yeah, one thing for me, I don't know. I spent a lot more time thinking than I did in undergrad. Like, I don't think you expect to sit and think as much.
I think one thing that surprised me is how close I am to the other students in my cohort. This is very different from undergrad, where you take classes with people, but it's there's more people in undergrad. In graduate programs, typically in stats, you have a very small, tight-knit community. And at Berkeley, it's like 10 to 12 students typically in each year. So you really do get to know the other students, and you take all of your classes together. And you see each other like around the department all the time.
Yeah, similar to that, also the meeting my cohort was also a nice surprise, but also within the department, I don't know if I can speak for other department, but the faculty was much more approachable than I would have thought. When you're from the undergrad, you see these professors as larger than they are, and when you get in the grad school, they are people, and it's nice to interact with.
I think going off what they both said, the biggest surprise to me was, as a PhD student, I feel like I'm considered closer to faculty than the undergrad students. And there's even a big difference, at least in our department, I think, between like a master's and a PhD. Like, for example, the PhD and faculty, so PhD students and faculty like share a lounge, whereas in my undergrad, it was just one stats lounge. I mean, we get our own offices. Again, like Simon was saying, professors are much more approachable. They actually seem to take an interest in knowing who you are specifically. You get to know the whole department, the inner workings much better. And I was surprised and very pleased with that.
Okay, I see some questions about the application process. One asks, what is the most challenging part of the application process for non-US citizens? And then someone else was asking about, I'm blanking right now, but let's just focus on that one right now. So Undergraduate assignment, if you want to talk about applying as an international student.
Yeah, I mean, applying as an international student is definitely an interesting affair overall. Like one of the things was that like I didn't really know anyone here except like like reading popular professors' names who are like really popular. Other than that, like I didn't really know much about the program. So I think you kind of have to do a little bit more research, digging up on like all kinds of social medias, Reddit, this and that, to kind of try to learn more about it, more about the different universities that you plan to apply to. I think also like time zone differences kind of make things a little bit trickier because you will send a mail maybe in your morning and it gets lost over multiple mails the next day, and so like if you send a mail asking for a clarification, it can just get delayed by a few days. So my advice would be twofold. One is to like have some buffer zone thinking about the time zone differences, because that will help you to like plan things ahead and not like rely on at the last moment for someone sitting in US to respond at like 9 p.m. And the second would be that I personally didn't do this, but like I feel like every international student should feel comfortable doing this. Most of the universities have list of students listed on their website, often having like even more contact information available. So if you have a particular question which is really urgent, oftentimes instead of reaching to the administrative authorities, it might be just like a nice attempt to like reach out to like students, like PhD students, and ask your questions. I think most people are receptive and willing to help out our applicants. And so I think that's another way you could kind of try to seek more information about different universities and things like that while you are planning to apply.
Yeah, and to add on that, my experience is so in Canada it's very similar to the US. There's not a lot of difference, but still it's hard to know what universities are looking for, especially like for the research statement of purpose and all these essay type of thing that I wasn't used to do. So I had some resources at my university that helped me do that. So that was pretty useful. Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing for me, like what to put on the application, because what they are looking for, basically. Yeah.
Okay, so I remember what the other question I was thinking of, and I think it also connects to another question that Kyla asked. But how did you know what programs you should apply to, and then where you would get in, and then when you got into places, how did you decide where to go? I think this is really difficult for me personally. I thought I wouldn't get in anywhere, so I was still applying to places like when deadlines were coming out. But one of my recommenders, actually, who was a STEM professor at Carnegie Mellon, assured me that I would be fine, and he was right. So if there's one thing I can say, it's that your recommenders, if they know the field well, they can give you a good idea of what you'll get in, where you'll get in. So if anyone answers one of those questions in terms of deciding where to apply, where you think you'll get in, and where after you get in, deciding where to go.
I can speak to that. So one of the things I did to try to narrow down programs is I had some potential research interests from my work experience, particularly in statistics for the social science and Bayesian statistics and causal inference and things like that. So I sort of only applied to places where there were professors doing that kind of research, because otherwise it's really overwhelming to look at a list of schools and be like, where do I apply? I definitely applied to, I think a lot of times people look at rankings, which probably means something. I definitely applied to a huge range of schools, from like ones that were top ranked on US News or whatever to ones that weren't even ranked on there, because I really didn't know where I stood. And it was nice to know that like at wherever I got in, I'd have somewhere that people were doing research that I was interested in. And then once I got in, I sort of tried, I went to visit days and heard from current students and sort of thought about which schools faculty were doing research I was most interested in. And then eventually it came down to a couple schools that I thought would both be a really good fit for me. So I decided on the one in the city that I felt like I'd be happier in. And I think that's also really important. You're allowed to make some of the decision based on personal factors also, because you're going to be in a place for 5 years. It's important to be at somewhere you can be happy.
I'll add a little more. One thing that I also did was I looked through the faculty, not just to see if there are people who had research interests, but to see at least what appeared to be the gender makeup, like if people appeared female. And there were some programs that had very few female faculty, so they weren't going to be places that I applied to. And that was something that was important to me. And when it came down to deciding, I also, if you have someone who knows you, who can help you narrow down your list, that's really great. So like Alex said, a professor, or like I had a postdoc who I'd worked with, who helped me talk through places that would be good. I ultimately chose the place because it was really close between another place in Michigan where I liked the current students the most, because I knew those were going to be people I was going to be around for the whole time. So that definitely came into play for my decision.
Yes, regarding composing the list, I actually didn't do a lot of narrowing down. I ended up applying to around like 24 schools, which I am a big proponent of spamming applications. If it's a school that I think you think you'd want to go to, I think it's a great investment. Does it cost some money? It does. It does cost some money. It's true. But fee waivers are easier to acquire than you might think. And once you have your statement of purpose, there's not like a linear relationship between the time required in number of schools. And it is a pain. It did take a lot of time, but I definitely don't regret it, because if I had applied to, let's say, 6 schools, I probably would not have included Berkeley, if I'm being honest. I wouldn't have just applied to like the top 6 programs. So when you think about, how much of an impact is it gonna have on your future, maybe 24 is a little much for the average person. I don't regret it, but maybe it's a lot. I personally would not put too much effort into narrowing down the list in general. And then moving on to the next part of that question, how to decide schools. Well, applying to that many resulted in more acceptances, which allowed me to really optimize and pick the school that it really was like the best fit for me. Because I mean, there's quite a few schools that I would have been very happy at, I think, but I was able to pick the one that had the best research fit, the best culture fit, which, getting more specific, I learned about that through methods that other people talked about, like visit days, talking to students. At a lot of these schools, professors were really receptive to scheduling one-on-one Zoom calls, talking about what their group culture is like, learning about how social the cohorts are, that sort of thing.
Okay, thanks for all those perspectives. I will add a caveat to what Austin said in terms of applying to as many places as possible. I'll say apply to places that you genuinely want to go to, because you don't waste your time putting together an application for someplace you're never going to go. Even if imagine if that's the only place only place you get accepted, would you go there? And if you wouldn't, don't apply. It's not worth it. Okay, so we're coming up on 6 o'clock. I do want to bring us back to this presentation really quickly. Okay. So we can wrap up. Okay. Okay, so closing thoughts. Thank you everyone for coming. UW Stats has a pre-application review service for people who are just need some help putting together their application. The application deadline is coming up soon. I think it's next week. So go ahead and try to get things together for that. StatsPhD.com will have more resources, or we'll be continuing to update it with information as the semester and the year progresses. We may also email you with resources from the StatsPhD.com email account. And there also will be a survey when the webinar is over. Please, please, please go to the survey and answer the questions. It's very helpful to know what you thought of the webinar and the panel, and to let us know what we can do better next time. So yeah, that's that. I think we've answered a lot of the questions in the Q&A. I think we can answer a couple more. If that's all right with all the panelists, can I get a nod of approval? Okay. So Jamie asked, in all of your years of academia, do you have any regrets or wish you had done anything different?
I was just typing answer to that in the chat. So I would say, like, I don't think regret is the right word to use. I think the right word should be, are there any lessons that you have learned during your PhD? And I think the lessons that I have learned is not to take any decision hastily. You should you always have time. And so it's always good to relax, sleep on the decision that you're trying to make, and then make your decision rather, and like discuss it with your peers, discuss it with your mentors, and like hear everyone's opinion, but like the final decision is yours, and you should like take that decision carefully up, and no matter what it is about. Like I think rushing into a decision is never a good idea, and the same holds true for academia as well.
Any other regrets or aren't regrets? Like lessons learned?
A regret I have is I did not go to a party that a friend was having for Diwali my first year because I had an exam the next day. And I wish I had gone to the party. It would have been fine. So this is just to say, like, it's good to take live your life, and there's room for that.
If there's one thing about research, the work will always be there. There'll never not be work to be done. So live your life when you get the chance. Anyone else want to answer the question? Okay, I saw a couple questions about like a research fit. Like someone asked if they're interested in machine learning, if they should pursue a stats PhD or a CS PhD. Someone also asked about dynamic systems and statistics, if that would be appropriate for a stats program. Does anyone have any input into those questions?
I had a little bit of input regarding the stats PhD versus CS. I think the question was specifically asking about research in machine learning. And it is true that I think historically CS departments have kind of dominated that field. And I applied to both CS and stats programs and got into both. So I had to decide between the two. And I resolved that issue by picking a school that had very close ties with the CS department. So at the end of the day, I have many professors to choose from who are cross-listed in the stats and CS department. And a lot of the research I'll be doing, people I've been talking with, are CS students who have taken similar courses and are working with the same professors. So if you're in that position where you're unsure of CS versus stats, I would perhaps look into schools with close relationships. And you can tell the metric I used, maybe some of these older students can improve upon this, but seeing how many faculty are cross-listed was very helpful for me. And which means that they're a professor in both computer science and statistics, and that would hopefully appear on their website somewhere.
Yeah, I don't have much to say, except I think Austin said it pretty well. It seems like a really good strategy. If you're not sure which department to apply to, then just apply, then pick a department that has close ties with the other. And I guess the same could be said about stats and biostats too, going back to the previous question.
Yeah, it's very true. And I think, depending on the department you may approach problems from a slightly different perspective, but there is a lot of overlap there that is, either can work, just depending on your particular interest. Someone with regards to the dynamical systems question, I don't think it's common, but it is a thing. Like there's a new professor in our department, Giles Hooker, who does things with dynamical systems or dynamic systems. You may be a bit more better suited in a math department, but you can definitely look into StatsPhD and see, what people are doing, try to find someone who fits that well. Okay, I think those are the main questions that folks have. Any closing thoughts, or how about this? If you give one piece of advice to applicants this year, what would it be? I'll let y'all ruminate for a second. I guess my piece of advice will be to apply. I think it's like if you're concerned or maybe scared or not sure, just give it a shot. It's not cheap, it's not trivial, but if you don't put your hat in the ring, you'll never get success, right? So I think if it's something you really want to do, it's worth giving it a shot and giving it a try. So that's my advice.
I would say take advantage of your resources and reach out to folks. Everyone sort of expressed that their cohort has been a really wonderful part of their experience, and in general, I think grad students care about paying it back. Helping people out with the application process. So, the likelihood is if you reach out to a grad student who you see on a website, they'll respond to you. And be happy to talk. So I would take advantage of doing that and getting that input.
I think if you're already attending this panel, you're already doing a great job. But I think the number one thing that really made me competitive for grad school, and it's probably true for a lot of other people on this panel as well, is just being willing to ask anyone a ton of questions. I mean, especially when I was an undergrad, anyone who had their PhD in stats, any kind of professor at any school, or even a grad student that I could get to listen to me, I would just ask them a ton of questions. I mean, I'd ask the same questions to a bunch of different people, get a bunch of different opinions. And again, by attending panels like this, that's already in line with that advice, but just continue to ask questions from people who have already been there, done that.
Kind of going off what Alex said, I would just say don't undersell yourself in the application process. Apply to a range of schools. It's easy to look at other people and think they're smarter than you, or you're sort of seeing what they present to the world, not the backstage. So people bring a lot of different skills, and I think stats programs value a lot of different things, and there's a lot of different things that are useful. And then when you're deciding between schools, obviously research them and make a good decision, but I don't think there's one right decision. I think it's likely you could be happy at a lot of different schools. So sort of don't overthink it.
Yeah, my advice would be to plan ahead of your application process, know your deadlines and whatever requirements there are, and take your decisions with calm and composure. Do not rush into any of the decisions, whether it's applying to universities, which ones do you want to go to, and later in your PhD as well. So good luck for the applications.
Yeah, I would say the one piece of advice I'd give myself is to not be afraid to fail. You'll fail many times, but this says nothing of you. You're only going to grow stronger because of it. And then after applications, when you're choosing a school, I think, echoing Aaron, you'll be happy. Don't stress too much. You'll be happy at many of these places. You already decided to apply to them for a reason. And if you're surrounded by good people, you'll enjoy it. And there's no one right decision there.
Awesome. That's amazing advice, everyone. Well, I believe that brings us to the end of the panel. I think if there's someone in particular you want to contact, some folks may put their email addresses in the chat if they feel comfortable. Otherwise, maybe you can get to us through the StatsPhD email account. Yeah, thank you very much for coming out. I hope this has been helpful and informative. We're going to keep trying to do these types of things and keep informing people about the process and about how to get into these programs, things like that. So yeah, thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists, thank you to the attendees. And everyone have a good night.